This story is for English listening practice. We focus on identifying gaslighting vocabulary and the lesson that trusting your intuition is the first step in self-protection. Let's begin. The phone vibrated against the marble countertop with a sharp and sudden buzz. I was standing at the kitchen island chopping vegetables for a stew. The afternoon sun slanted through the blinds in a peaceful and golden angle. It felt like any other Tuesday. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and reached for the device. I expected a notification from the electric company, or perhaps a delivery update. I did not expect to see a new group chat notification at the top of my screen. The title of the group stopped my breath in my throat. It was simply labeled with my full legal name. I frowned at the screen. My heart did an odd little skip. I saw 3 participants listed in the group details. The first was Lucas. He was my husband of 7 years. The second was Nora. She was my cousin and the person I considered my sister. The third participant was me. I slid my thumb across the glass to unlock the phone. I assumed they were planning a surprise for our anniversary. I felt a warm wave of affection as the message thread opened. That warmth turned to ice in a fraction of a second. I saw a message from Lucas sent 1 minute ago. He wrote that she is becoming impossible to live with. I stared at the words. I read them 3 times. I could not comprehend them. We had just shared a lovely breakfast that morning. He had kissed my forehead and told me I was his rock. A second bubble appeared below his text. It was a reply from Nora. She wrote that we just need to stick to the plan until the paperwork is ready. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. I gripped the phone tighter. I tried to type a question mark. I wanted to ask what paperwork they were discussing. I wanted to ask why they were talking about me in the third person. Before my finger could touch the keyboard, the screen flickered. A gray system alert appeared at the bottom of the chat window. It stated that I had been removed from the conversation. The messages vanished. The group title disappeared. My inbox returned to its normal state, showing only my last text to my mother about a recipe. I stood frozen in the silent kitchen. The refrigerator hummed with a low and steady drone. I questioned my own eyes. I wondered if I had fallen asleep standing up. I wondered if I was having a medical episode. I quickly navigated to my deleted messages folder. It was empty. There was no trace of the conversation. It was as if it never happened. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my stomach. I checked the time. It was 5 o'clock in the evening. Lucas would be home in 15 minutes. I put the knife down. I could not finish chopping the carrots. I felt unsafe in my own home. I walked to the living room and sat on the edge of the sofa. I stared at the front door. I tried to rationalize what I had seen. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe they were planning a surprise renovation and the paperwork was for a permit. But the phrase "impossible to live with" echoed in my mind. It did not sound like a renovation. It sounded like a discard. The sound of a car engine in the driveway made me jump. I stood up quickly. I smoothed my shirt. I had to pretend everything was normal. I needed more information before I confronted them. If I asked now, they would deny it. They would say I was seeing things. I needed to be smart. The front door unlocked with a heavy click. Lucas walked in. He looked handsome in his work suit. He carried his briefcase in one hand and a bouquet of lilies in the other. He smiled when he saw me. He walked over and kissed my cheek. He handed me the flowers. He told me he saw them at the store and thought of me. I took the flowers. Their scent was overwhelming. I looked into his eyes. They were warm and brown and familiar. I searched for a sign of deception. I looked for a flicker of guilt. There was nothing. He looked completely at peace. He loosened his tie and asked about my day. I forced my voice to remain steady. I told him it was a quiet day. I told him I just did some chores. He nodded and walked toward the kitchen. He called out over his shoulder that Nora was coming over for dinner. He said she wanted to see how I was doing. My grip tightened on the flower stems. The thorns dug into my palm. I felt a sharp physical pain that grounded me. Nora was coming here. The two people who were discussing a plan about me were going to be in my house. I walked into the kitchen to find a vase. I watched Lucas pour himself a glass of water. He took a sip and looked at me with a tilted head. He asked if I was feeling all right. He said I looked a little pale. I turned away to fill the vase with water. I told him I had a slight headache. He made a sympathetic noise. He came up behind me and rubbed my shoulders. His touch used to be comforting. Now it felt like a threat. He whispered that I should relax. He said Nora would cheer me up. He said I had been seeming a little stressed lately. The word stressed landed like a heavy stone. It connected with the message I saw about me being impossible. He was already setting the stage. He was planting the seed that I was unwell. I placed the lilies in the vase. I arranged them slowly. I realized I was trapped in a performance. I had to play the role of the happy wife, while they played the role of the concerned family. I heard a car door slam outside. Nora had arrived. I took a deep breath. I prepared to welcome the woman who claimed she was sticking to the plan. I walked to the door to let her in. I knew then that the door I was opening would not lead to a family dinner. It would lead to a battlefield I was not prepared to fight on. I opened the door and smiled. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Nora stood on the porch with a large ceramic casserole dish in her hands. She wore a bright yellow sundress that seemed to mock the darkness gathering in my mind. Her smile was wide and dazzling. She breezed past me into the hallway without waiting for an invitation. She told me she made her famous lasagna because she knew I would be too tired to cook. She emphasized the word tired. It was a subtle dig. It implied I was incapable. I closed the door and locked it. The sound of the lock clicking into place usually made me feel secure. Now it felt like I was sealing myself inside a cage with two predators. I followed her into the kitchen. Lucas was already there. He was taking the heavy dish from her hands. He looked at her with a gratitude that went beyond politeness. He told her she was a lifesaver. He told her that I had been struggling lately. I stood by the kitchen island and watched them. They moved around each other with a fluid grace. Nora opened the silverware drawer without asking. She knew exactly where the forks were. She knew which cupboard held the dinner plates. It felt like she had already moved in. I cleared my throat and asked Lucas what he meant by struggling. He stopped setting the table. He looked at me with a furrowed brow. He used that soft and patronizing tone he had started using recently. He said I was forgetful. He said I seemed overwhelmed by basic tasks. He turned to Nora and said he was worried about my stress levels. Nora nodded in agreement. She looked at me with pity in her eyes. She said we all have limits. She said I just needed to let others take the lead for a while. We sat down to eat. The lasagna smelled rich and savory. My stomach churned. I pushed the food around my plate with my fork. They talked about people I did not know. They laughed at inside jokes. I felt like a ghost at my own table. I tried to join the conversation. I asked Lucas about the project he was working on. He waved his hand dismissively. He said it was too technical to explain. He said he did not want to bore me. 2 minutes later, he turned to Nora. He began explaining the exact same project in great detail. Nora leaned forward. She rested her chin on her hand. She nodded at all the right times. She asked insightful questions. Lucas lit up. He became animated and passionate. He looked at me, and then back at Nora. He said it was so refreshing to talk to someone who actually listened. The comment struck me like a physical blow. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. I told him I always listened. I reminded him that I had proofread his proposal just last week. He laughed. It was a cold and dry sound. He said reading words was not the same as understanding concepts. Nora reached across the table and touched his hand. She told him he was brilliant. She told him his mind was wasted on people who did not appreciate his vision. She did not look at me when she said it. She stared directly into his eyes. I felt a surge of anger. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the plate against the wall. But I remembered the text message. I remembered the phrase, impossible to live with. If I reacted now, I would prove them right. I would look unstable. I took a sip of water. My hand trembled slightly. I set the glass down with a loud clink. The next few weeks became a blur of confusion and doubt. Nora began to appear at our house every single day. She did not call first. She simply arrived. She brought coffee in the morning. She brought mail in from the box. She started rearranging things. I would come downstairs to find the living room furniture shifted. When I asked why, Nora would smile. She would say she just wanted to open up the flow of the room. She would say the old layout was depressing. Lucas loved it. He said the house finally felt alive. I felt like I was losing my territory. One afternoon, I went to the pantry to find the flour. It was gone. I searched every shelf. I asked Nora if she had seen it. She looked at me with wide, innocent eyes. She said she threw it out because it had expired months ago. She said she was only trying to keep us safe. I checked the grocery list. I kept on the fridge. I had written flour on it yesterday. The word was crossed out. I did not cross it out. I started to question my memory. I would leave my car keys in the bowl by the door. An hour later, they would be gone. I would search the house in a panic. I would find them in the pocket of a coat I had not worn in a year. I would find them in the bathroom cabinet. Lucas would shake his head. He would tell me I was losing my grip. He would suggest I see a doctor. He said early onset dementia ran in families. He said he was scared for me. Nora was always there to comfort him. She would rub his back while he lamented my decline. I started keeping a journal. I wrote down where I put things. I wrote down conversations word for word. I needed to know I was not crazy. One day, I left the journal on my nightstand. When I came back from the shower, it was moved. It was angled differently. I opened it. A page was torn out. It was the page where I wrote about the group chat. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. They knew I was tracking them. Or maybe I was paranoid. Maybe I tore the page out by mistake. My mind was spinning. I could not trust my own perception. That evening, Lucas came home with news. He said Nora was having trouble with her landlord. He said her apartment building was being sold. He said she needed a place to stay for a few weeks. He said it would be good for me. He said having her in the house would help me manage my daily tasks. He did not ask me. He informed me. I tried to protest. I said we needed our privacy. Lucas slammed his hand on the table. It was the first time he had shown open aggression. He said I was being selfish. He said Nora was family. He said after everything she did for me, I was treating her like a stranger. He said this attitude was exactly why our marriage was suffering. Nora moved in the next day. She did not bring boxes. She brought suitcases that looked like they were packed for a permanent vacation. She took the guest room down the hall. It was only 10 steps from our bedroom door. I laid awake that night, listening to the house settle. I heard footsteps in the hall. They were soft and padded. I looked at the clock. It was 2 a.m. I nudged Lucas. He was fast asleep. I got up and cracked the door open. The hallway was dark. The door to the guest room was slightly ajar. A faint light spilled out. I heard whispering. It was too low to make out the words. I stepped into the hall. The floorboard creaked. The light in the guest room instantly clicked off. The whispering stopped. I stood there in the silence. I called out Nora's name. There was no answer. I walked to her door and pushed it open. She was in bed. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing was rhythmic and heavy. She was feigning sleep. I knew it. But I could not prove it. The isolation intensified. Lucas stopped inviting me to work functions. He said he did not want to put me under pressure. He said my anxiety made other people uncomfortable. Instead, he took Nora. He claimed she was his assistant for the evening. He said she knew how to network. I stayed home alone. I sat in the silent house and stared at the walls. I felt like a prisoner. I checked the phone bill. I wanted to see if they were calling each other. The access password had been changed. I tried my usual password. It was rejected. I tried my birthday. Rejected. I asked Lucas for the new password. He said he changed it for security reasons. He said hackers were targeting our area. He said I did not need to worry about bills anymore. He said Nora was helping him manage the finances now. He said it was one less thing for me to mess up. I went to the bank the next day. I wanted to withdraw some cash. The teller looked at me with a strange expression. She typed on her keyboard. She frowned. She told me I did not have authority to withdraw from the joint account. She said my status had been changed to deposit only. I felt the room spin. I asked who authorized this. She said my husband came in with signed power of attorney documents. She said the documents stated I was medically incapacitated. I told her I signed nothing. She looked at the screen again. She said the notary seal was valid. She said I should speak to my husband. I walked out of the bank into the bright sunlight. The world felt sharp and jagged. They were stealing my life. They were stealing my money. And they were doing it by painting me as insane. I drove home with white knuckles. I decided to confront them. I would not scream. I would not cry. I would demand answers. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw a contractor truck. A man was measuring the windows. I walked up to him. I asked what he was doing. He checked his clipboard. He said he was measuring for the security bars. He said the owner ordered high-grade steel bars for all ground floor windows. He said the owner wanted to keep the resident safe. He looked at me. He asked if I was the resident. I realized then that the bars were not to keep people out. They were to keep me in. I told him there was a mistake. I told him to leave. He looked confused. Just then, Nora stepped out of the front door. She held a glass of lemonade. She smiled at the contractor. She told him to ignore me. She told him I was having a bad day. She touched her temple with her finger and made a twisting motion. The contractor nodded understandingly. He went back to measuring. I walked past Nora. I did not look at her. I went straight to Lucas's home office. The door was locked. It was never locked before. I rattled the handle. I heard movement inside. Paper shuffling. A drawer sliding shut. Lucas opened the door. He looked annoyed. He asked why I was making a scene outside. I asked him about the bank account. I asked him about the power of attorney. He sighed. He looked disappointed. He said he did this to protect our assets. He said my spending was out of control. He said I bought things and forgot about them. He said I was a liability. I told him that was a lie. I told him I saw the group chat. I told him I knew about the plan. His face changed. The annoyance vanished. It was replaced by a cold, blank mask. He stepped closer to me. He loomed over me. He asked what chat I was talking about. He said I was hallucinating again. He said this was exactly why he needed legal control. He said I was inventing conspiracies. He called Nora into the room. She appeared instantly. She stood beside him. They looked like a wall of stone. Lucas told Nora that I was seeing imaginary messages. Nora shook her head. She reached out and took my hand. Her hand was cold. She told me they loved me. She told me they were doing this for my own good. She said the clinic would be able to help me with these delusions. The word clinic hung in the air. It was the first time they had said it out loud. I pulled my hand away. I backed out of the room. I realized I had made a tactical error. I had revealed my hand too early. I had no evidence. I only had my voice. And my voice was being systematically discredited. I went to the bedroom and locked the door. I sat on the bed. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I could not fight them with anger. I needed to fight them with logic. I needed to find the paperwork. I needed to find the phone. I needed to find the digital trail they thought they had erased. I waited until evening. The house was quiet. I heard the television in the living room. They were watching a movie. I could hear them laughing. It sounded domestic and happy. It made my stomach turn. I crept into the hallway. I needed to get into the office. I knew Lucas kept a spare key in the garage, hidden in a toolbox. It was a long shot, but I had to try. I went to the back door. It was locked. I turned the deadbolt. It would not move. It was a double-cylinder lock. It needed a key from the inside. They had changed the locks. I was trapped. I went to the window. It was jammed. I pushed on it. It would not budge. I saw a small metal bracket screwed into the frame. They had screwed the windows shut. Panic began to rise in my chest. It felt like water filling my lungs. I was in my own home, but it was a fortress designed to contain me. I went back to the bedroom. I looked at my phone. I had no signal. The Wi-Fi was disconnected on my device. I was cut off from the world. I sat on the floor and hugged my knees. I rocked back and forth. I told myself I was sane. I told myself I was strong. I repeated my name. I repeated my birthday. I repeated the facts. I saw the chat. I saw the bank teller. I saw the contractor. These things were real. They were gaslighting me, on an industrial scale. The next morning, the dynamic shifted again. Lucas acted as if nothing had happened. He made me breakfast. He put a pill on the plate next to my eggs. It was a small blue pill. I asked what it was. He said it was a vitamin. He said I looked pale. He said Nora recommended it. I looked at the pill. I knew I could not take it. I pretended to take a sip of juice. I palmed the pill. I slipped it into my pocket. I smiled at him. I told him I felt better. I told him he was right. I said I had been stressed. I said I would let him handle the finances. I said I trusted him. He relaxed. His shoulders dropped. He smiled at Nora. It was a look of victory. He thought I had broken. He thought I had accepted the narrative. That was my only advantage. If they thought I was compliant, they might get sloppy. They might leave a door unlocked. They might leave a phone unguarded. I decided to play the part of the fragile wife. I would be the doll they wanted me to be. I would sleep when they told me to sleep. I would eat what they told me to eat. But I would be watching. I would be listening. And I would be waiting for the one mistake that would give me my life back. Nora began to treat me like a child. She laid out my clothes. She brushed my hair. She spoke to me in simple sentences. She told me stories about my childhood that I did not remember. She said I used to have episodes like this when I was a girl. She said my mother used to hide it from people. I knew it was a lie. My memory was sharp. But I nodded. I said maybe she was right. I asked her to tell me more. I wanted to see how far she would go. She spun a web of lies about my past. She planted false memories. She tried to rewrite my history. It was terrifying how easily the lies rolled off her tongue. She was a master architect of deceit. One afternoon, while Nora was in the shower, I saw Lucas's laptop on the coffee table. It was closed. The little light on the side was pulsing. It was in sleep mode. I looked at the bathroom door. I heard the water running. I looked at the kitchen. Lucas was outside on a call. I had 10 seconds. I crept to the laptop. I lifted the lid. The screen came to life. It asked for a password. I stared at the box. I tried the word listening. It was incorrect. I tried Nora. Incorrect. I tried my own name, followed by the word crazy. It unlocked. The desktop appeared. My heart hammered against my ribs. I saw a folder on the desktop labeled Medical File. I hovered the mouse over it. Before I could click, the front door handle turned. Lucas was coming back in. I slammed the lid shut. I threw myself onto the sofa and grabbed a magazine. I was staring at a page about gardening when Lucas walked in. He looked at me. He looked at the laptop. He looked back at me. His eyes narrowed. He asked if I had touched his computer. I looked up with a vacant expression. I asked him what computer. I pointed to the television. I asked if we could watch the nature show. He stared at me for a long moment. He was assessing me. Then he shrugged. He picked up the laptop and tucked it under his arm. He said he had some work to finish in the office. He walked away. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I had seen the folder name. They were building a medical file. They were going to commit me. The clock was ticking louder than ever. I had to move from defense to offense. I had to find a way to extract that file. The compliance strategy bought me a fragile peace, but it was a peace built on sand. I moved through the house, like a ghost in my own life. I smiled when Nora criticized my outfit. I nodded when Lucas explained simple concepts to me, as if I were a toddler. I swallowed the rage until it burned a hole in my stomach. They thought I was broken. They thought the medication they forced on me was working. They did not know I was spitting the blue pills into the soil of the potted fern in the dining room. The fern was dying, its leaves turning brown and brittle from the chemicals. It was the only physical proof I had that the pills were poison. I watched the plant wither day by day, a silent casualty of my secret war. 3 days after the laptop incident, Lucas announced we were hosting a dinner party. He said it was for his partners at the firm. He said it was crucial for his promotion. He looked at me with a warning in his eyes. He said I needed to be on my best behavior. He said I should not drink too much. He said I should not tell my confusing stories. Nora stood behind him, holding a dress she had selected for me. It was a drab, gray, shapeless thing that made me look ill. She said it was elegant. She said it would hide how thin I had become. I took the dress. I thanked her. I felt like a prisoner putting on a uniform for a parole hearing. The evening of the party arrived with a suffocating humidity. The air conditioning was set to a freezing temperature, yet I was sweating. The guests arrived in a flurry of expensive perfume and loud laughter. I stood by the door, forcing a smile that made my jaw ache. There were 3 couples. I recognized one of the men, a senior partner named Robert. He looked at me with a flicker of surprise. He asked how I was recovering. I froze. I asked him what he meant. Lucas stepped in immediately. He put a heavy hand on the small of my back. He told Robert that I was having good days and bad days. He said tonight was a good day. He steered Robert away before I could correct him. The narrative was already set. To the outside world, I was a woman in recovery from a mental breakdown. We moved to the dining room. Nora acted as the hostess. She directed people to their seats. She poured the wine. She laughed at the jokes. I sat at the end of the table, silent and watchful. I saw the way the other wives looked at me. They offered tight, pitying smiles. They spoke to me slowly and clearly. One woman asked if I was enjoying my time off work. I opened my mouth to say I was fired, not on leave. I wanted to scream that I was capable and sharp. But I saw Lucas watching me. His hand was resting near his steak knife. I swallowed the words. I told her yes. I told her it was restful. The lie tasted like ash. Halfway through the main course, I reached for the water pitcher. The handle was slick with condensation. As I lifted it, the bottom of the pitcher seemed to detach. Ice water cascaded across the table. It soaked the tablecloth. It drenched the lap of the woman sitting next to me. She shrieked and jumped up. I stared at the pitcher in my hand. The base had been unscrewed. It was a deliberate trap. Silence fell over the room. It was thick and heavy. I looked at Lucas. He was shaking his head with a sad resignation. He apologized to the guest. He grabbed a napkin and started blotting the spill. He looked at me and told me it was okay. He said accidents happen when I get the tremors. I did not have tremors. My hands were steady, but the guests did not see the unscrewed base. They saw a woman who could not hold a pitcher. They saw a husband cleaning up her mess. I stood up to help. Nora appeared at my elbow. She took the pitcher from my hand. She told me to go sit in the living room. She said she would handle it. She spoke to me like a naughty child. I looked at the guests. They were avoiding my eyes. They were embarrassed for me. I felt the humiliation burn my skin. I walked out of the room. I heard the low murmur of conversation resume behind me. I heard Lucas sigh. I heard him say he was sorry they had to see that. I stood in the dark hallway and dug my fingernails into my palms until the skin broke. The isolation deepened after the dinner party. My phone, which I was only allowed to use under supervision, became a source of horror. One morning, Lucas handed it to me. He said my mother had texted. He said I should reply, so she would not worry. I opened the message thread. I scrolled up. I saw messages I did not write. There were long, rambling paragraphs sent at 3 a.m. They were filled with accusations and nonsense. One message told my mother I hated her. Another said the government was watching me. I stared at the screen in disbelief. I told Lucas I did not write these. He looked at me with that same practiced pity. He said I did write them. He said he found me typing them in the middle of the night. He said he tried to stop me, but I screamed at him. I began to doubt my own reality. I had no memory of waking up. I had no memory of typing. But the texts were there. They were in my sent folder. I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. Was it possible? Was I doing things in my sleep? Was the stress causing a dissociative break? That was their goal. They wanted me to question my own mind so deeply that I would voluntarily sign the papers. I looked at Lucas. I asked him if I was crazy. He hugged me. He held me tight. He whispered that I was not crazy, just sick. He said he would take care of me. For a second, I wanted to believe him. It would be so easy to let go. It would be so easy to accept the diagnosis and stop fighting. Then I smelled it. His shirt smelled of Nora's perfume. It was a distinctive floral scent. The scent of betrayal. My resolve hardened. I was not sick. I was surrounded by monsters. The next week, I tried to escape. It was a clumsy, desperate attempt. Lucas had left the garage door open for a brief moment while he took out the trash. Nora was in the shower. I saw the sliver of sunlight hitting the concrete driveway. It looked like freedom. I ran. I did not put on shoes. I sprinted through the kitchen, into the garage, and toward the light. I made it to the end of the driveway. The pavement was hot against my bare feet. I turned left, toward the neighbor's house. I was going to pound on their door. I was going to scream for help. I heard footsteps behind me, heavy and fast. Lucas caught me before I reached the property line. He grabbed my arm. His grip was bruising. He spun me around. He was not smiling. His face was a mask of fury. He hissed at me to get back inside. I struggled. I shouted help. The neighbor, an elderly man named Mr. Henderson, was watering his lawn. He looked up. He saw us. I screamed his name. I yelled that they were holding me prisoner. Lucas waved at him. He shouted that I was having an episode. He tapped his head. Mr. Henderson hesitated. He looked at me, wild-eyed and barefoot, screaming about prisoners. Then he looked at Lucas, calm and professional in his suit. Mr. Henderson turned off his hose and went inside his house. He closed the door. Lucas dragged me back into the house. He threw me onto the sofa. Nora came downstairs wrapped in a towel. She asked what happened. Lucas said I tried to run. He said I was shouting at the neighbors. Nora shook her head. She went to the kitchen and came back with a glass of water and 2 blue pills. She told me to take them. I refused. I clamped my mouth shut. Lucas squeezed my jaw. He forced my mouth open. He shoved the pills in. He held my nose until I swallowed. I gagged. I felt the pills slide down my throat. They dragged me to the bedroom and locked the door. I lay in the dark as the drugs took hold. My limbs felt heavy. My thoughts became sludge. I floated in a gray haze. I lost track of time. It might have been hours or days. When I woke up, the room was different. The curtains were drawn tight. The furniture was rearranged. The dresser was on the wrong wall. The bed was facing the wrong way. I sat up, dizzy and nauseous. I thought I was in a different house. I started to panic. I stumbled to the door. It was locked. I pounded on it. Nora opened it. She was wearing a nurse's scrub top. She looked efficient and cold. She asked why I was making noise. I asked where I was. She said I was in my bedroom. She said I was confused again. I looked around the room. I realized the furniture was the same, just moved. They were gaslighting my spatial awareness. They were making sure I never felt grounded. I asked for water. She handed me a plastic cup. No glass. I was on suicide watch in my own home. I realized the escalation had reached a critical point. They were no longer just messing with my mail. They were dismantling my identity. They were preparing for the endgame. I needed to know what the endgame was. I needed to see that file. The opportunity came in the form of a broken router. The internet went down on a rainy Tuesday. Lucas was furious. He needed to make a conference call. He tried to fix it, but he was not technical. He called the service provider. But they put him on hold. He paced the hallway cursing. He threw his phone onto the entryway table and went into the garage to check the circuit breaker. Nora was in the kitchen, blending a smoothie. The blender was loud. It covered the sound of my footsteps. I saw Lucas's phone on the table. It was unlocked. He had been on a call, and the screen had not timed out yet. I snatched the phone. I ran into the downstairs bathroom and locked the door. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the device. I sat on the closed toilet lid. I had maybe 2 minutes before he realized the phone was gone. I did not look at texts. I did not look at calls. I went straight to the voice recorder app. I had seen him using it to dictate notes for work. I hoped he was arrogant enough to dictate notes about his life. I scrolled through the list. Most were labeled with client names. Then I saw one labeled, Timeline. I pressed play. I held the speaker to my ear. Lucas's voice was calm and businesslike. He was dictating a plan. He said the incompetence phase was complete. He said the public incident at the dinner party was a success. He said the next step was the violent outburst. He said they needed a police report. He said once they had a police report of domestic violence initiated by the wife, the institutionalization order would be automatic. He said the assets would be transferred to his control within 30 days of my admission to the facility. He said Nora should initiate the provocation on Friday. Friday. That was 2 days away. They were going to stage a fight. They were going to make me hurt one of them. And then they were going to call the police. I stopped the recording. I needed to send this to someone. I tried to email it to myself, but the internet was down. That was why he was angry. The Wi-Fi was dead. I had evidence, but I could not move it. I heard Lucas shouting my name. He was looking for his phone. I heard him banging on doors. I had to think fast. I could not keep the phone. He would find it. He would know I heard the recording. He would accelerate the timeline. I deleted the recording from the recently played list, so it wouldn't be at the top. I wiped the screen on my shirt to remove my fingerprints. I flushed the toilet to mask the sound of me unlocking the door. I opened the door and stepped out. Lucas was standing right there. His face was red. He demanded his phone. I held it out to him. I looked at him with dull, heavy eyes. I told him. I found it in the laundry basket. I told him I thought it was the remote control. I acted confused. I acted drugged. He snatched the phone. He looked at the screen. He looked at me. He seemed to buy it. He muttered that I was useless. He walked away. I went back to my room. My heart was beating so fast I thought it would explode. I had a deadline. Friday. I had 48 hours to save my life. I knew I could not stop the provocation. If they wanted a fight, they would create one. If I refused to fight, they would likely hurt themselves and blame me. Nora would scratch her own face and say I did it. Lucas would punch a wall and say I threw a vase. I could not win a physical confrontation. I needed a witness, a real witness, not a neighbor who thought I was crazy, not a friend who had been poisoned by their lies. I needed a third party. I spent the next day planning. I searched the house for anything I could use. I found an old baby monitor in the back of the linen closet. It was from when my sister visited years ago with her infant. I checked the battery. It was dead. I found a charging cable in a junk drawer that Nora hadn't cleared out yet. I plugged it in behind the dresser in the guest room, Nora's room. The receiver unit I hid under my mattress. I needed to know what they were saying when I wasn't in the room. That night, I listened. The static was bad, but I could hear them. They were in the living room. Nora was complaining about the timeline. She said I was too passive. She said she was worried I wouldn't snap. Lucas laughed. He said everyone snaps if you push the right buttons. He said he was going to destroy the one thing I had left. He said he was going to burn my sketchbook. Drawing was my only solace. I had a sketchbook hidden under the loose floorboard in the closet. It was filled with drawings of them. Drawings of the truth. Drawings of Nora with a snake's tongue. Drawings of Lucas with hollow eyes. It was my therapy. If he found it, he would burn it. But more importantly, if he burned it in front of me, he knew I would react. That was the trigger. That was the Friday provocation. I realized then that the sketchbook was not just art. It was bait. If I let them burn it, and I screamed, and I fought to save it, they would have their violence. They would call the police. The police would see a hysterical woman attacking her husband over a book. It would be the end. But if I did nothing, if I watched it burn and sat in silence, their plan would fail. They would not have their incident, but I needed more than just a failed plan. I needed to turn the trap around. Thursday passed in a blur of anxiety. I watched them set the stage. Nora moved the heavy brass fireplace poker to the coffee table. It was a prop. They wanted it within reach. They wanted me to grab it. I made sure to stay far away from it. I kept my hands folded in my lap. I spoke only when spoken to. I saw the frustration growing in Nora's eyes. She knocked over a glass of water and blamed me. I apologized and cleaned it up. She ripped a button off my shirt as she walked past. I simply went upstairs and changed. I was a wall of smooth, impenetrable calm. It was driving her mad. Friday evening arrived. The atmosphere was electric. The air felt charged with static. Lucas came home early. He loosened his tie. He poured a drink. He drank it in one gulp. He looked at me. He asked me to bring him my sketchbook. He said he wanted to see my art. I told him I didn't know where it was. He smiled a cruel, thin smile. He said he knew where it was. He walked to the closet. He pulled up the loose board. He took out the book. My heart hammered. He flipped through the pages. He laughed at the drawings. He showed them to Nora. She sneered. She said they were the drawings of a disturbed mind. Lucas walked to the fireplace. He lit a match. He threw the match onto the logs. The fire roared to life. He held the sketchbook over the flames. He looked at me. He waited for the scream. He waited for the lunge. I sat on the sofa. I crossed my legs. I picked up a magazine. I did not look at the fire. I looked at him. I asked him if we were having chicken for dinner. His face fell. The anticipation vanished. He was confused. He lowered the book slightly. He taunted me. He said he was going to burn it. He said my work was garbage. I turned a page of the magazine. I said that was fine. I said I could always buy a new one. I saw the vein in his forehead pulse. He was losing control. The script was broken. He threw the book into the fire. It caught instantly. The paper curled and blackened. I watched my drawings burn. I watched the image of the snake-tongued Nora turn to ash. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but I did not make a sound. Lucas stared at me. He was breathing hard. He looked at Nora. Nora looked furious. This was not the reaction they needed. There was no violence. There was no shouting. There was just a woman reading a magazine while a man burned a book. It was abusive, but it was not grounds for my institutionalization. It made him look like the aggressor. He kicked the fireplace grate. Clang. The noise was loud and jarring. He turned to me. He screamed. He yelled that I was a monster. He yelled that I was cold and unfeeling. He was trying to provoke me with insults. Since the object destruction failed, I stayed silent. I knew the silence was my weapon. I knew that every second I remained calm, their plan disintegrated. But I also knew they were desperate. A desperate enemy is a dangerous enemy. Nora walked over to me. She stood right in front of me. She blocked my light. She leaned down. She whispered things that no human should say to another. She attacked my ability to be a mother. She attacked my dead father. She attacked every insecurity I had. She wanted me to slap her. I saw her cheek twitch. She was ready to fall. She was ready to bruise. I looked her in the eye. I saw the emptiness there. I saw the greed. I realized she did not hate me. She just wanted my life. She wanted my house, my money, my status. I was just an obstacle to be removed. That realization killed the last ounce of affection I had for her. I did not want to slap her. I wanted to destroy her. And I knew that hitting her would save her. So I smiled. It was a small, cold smile. I told her she had something in her teeth. Nora recoiled. She stood up. She touched her mouth. The moment was broken. Lucas was pacing. He was muttering. He grabbed his keys. He said he needed to go for a drive. He said he couldn't look at me. He stormed out. Nora followed him to the door. She whispered something to him. He nodded. He left. Nora turned back to me. She said I was lucky. She said next time, I wouldn't be so lucky. She went to her room and slammed the door. I was alone in the living room. The fire was dying down. My sketchbook was ash, but I was still free. I had survived the Friday provocation. However, I knew I had only bought myself time. They would try again. And next time, they wouldn't rely on me reacting. Next time, they would manufacture the injury themselves. I needed to get out. Tonight, I waited until the house was silent. I knew Nora was a heavy sleeper, but I couldn't risk the stairs creaking. I needed a different exit. I looked at the window with the security bars. The contractor had installed them, but he had mentioned a fire release mechanism. It was required by code. I had watched him install it. It was a small pin, hidden under the sill. You had to push it up with a thin tool. I looked around the room. I saw a letter opener on the desk. It was thin and metal. I crept to the window. I slid the letter opener under the sill. I felt around. I hit something hard. I pushed. Nothing happened. I pushed harder. I heard a soft click. The heavy iron grate swung open just an inch. It was unlocked. I pushed the window up. The cool night air hit my face. It smelled like rain and freedom. I could climb out. I could run. But where? I had no money. I had no phone. I had no car keys. If I ran now, the police would pick me up as a wandering mental patient. Lucas would have reported me missing. He would show them the papers. They would bring me back. Escaping the house was not enough. I needed to escape the legal cage they had built. I needed the evidence. I looked back at the hallway, the office door. Lucas had left in a rage. Had he locked it? I walked softly to the door. I turned the handle. It turned. He had forgotten. In his anger, he had made a mistake. I slipped inside. I did not turn on the light. I used the moonlight from the window. I went to the file cabinet. It was locked. I went to his desk. I opened the top drawer. I felt around for the spare key. It was gone. I checked under the desk lamp. Nothing. I checked the pencil cup. Nothing. Then I remembered. The false bottom in the decorative globe on the shelf. He used to hide cash. There. I lifted the top of the globe. Inside, there was a small silver key. I grabbed it. I went to the file cabinet. I inserted the key. It turned. The drawer slid open with a smooth, oiled glide. I flipped through the folders. Insurance, mortgage, car, medical. I pulled the medical file. It was thick. I opened it. It was full of forged reports. There were logs of incidents that never happened. There was a signed affidavit from a doctor I never met. And there, at the back, was the financial agreement. It was a document transferring the deed of the house to a trust managed by Lucas and Nora, effective upon my commitment. It was dated for next Monday. I had the proof. But a folder of papers was heavy. And if they caught me with it, it was over. I needed to digitize it. I needed to send it. I looked at the computer. I woke it up. Password. I typed the one I had guessed before. Emma Crazy. It worked. I scanned the documents. The scanner light was too bright in the dark room. I threw a coat over it to muffle the light. I scanned page after page. My hands were flying. I heard a car pull into the driveway. Lucas was back. I had seconds. I attached the files to an email. I typed the address of the only person I could trust, my brother in California. We hadn't spoken in months because Lucas told me he was busy, but I knew he would read this. I hit send. The progress bar crawled. The front door opened. I heard Lucas's voice. He was talking to Nora. He was coming down the hall. The bar was at 90%. 95 cent. I closed the browser. I deleted the history. I put the computer to sleep. I threw the file back in the drawer. I locked it. I dropped the key back in the globe. I dove behind the heavy velvet curtains just as the office door opened. Lucas walked in. He flipped on the light. He stood in the center of the room. He looked at the desk. He looked at the chair. He sniffed the air. He smelled me. I held my breath until my lungs burned. He walked to the window. He looked out at the dark lawn. Then he turned off the light and left. I stayed behind the curtain for an hour. My legs were cramping. I was exhausted. But I had done it. The evidence was out. My brother had the file. Now I just had to survive. Until he saw it. I crept back to my room. I lay in bed. I stared at the ceiling. I smiled. They thought they were the authors of this story. They thought they were writing a tragedy about a crazy woman. They didn't know the genre had just changed. It was no longer a tragedy. It was a revenge thriller. And I was the one holding the pen. The Saturday morning sun hit the kitchen floor, but the house felt cold. I woke up with a sharp headache, the residue of the adrenaline spike from the night before. I had sent the email to my brother, but silence was my only feedback. I did not know if he had opened it. I did not know if he believed me. I walked into the kitchen. Nora was already there. She was humming a tune. She was making pancakes. The smell of burning butter filled the air. She smiled at me. It was a predatory smile. She asked if I slept well. She asked if I had any more bad dreams. I told her I slept like a baby. I lied. I had stared at the door handle all night, waiting for it to turn. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Lucas had unlocked the restrictions for the weekend. A small reward for my good behavior during the fire incident. I pulled it out. A text from a number I did not recognize. It said simply, "The package is received. The contents are disturbing. Sit tight. I am coming." It was my brother. He had used a burner phone. He had read the files. A wave of relief washed over me. So powerful, I almost dropped the coffee mug. I was not alone anymore. But coming meant he was driving from California. That was a 12-hour drive. I had to survive another day. And I needed more than just the medical file. I needed the undeniable proof of their conspiracy. I needed the chat logs. Lucas walked in. He was wearing his running clothes. He looked energized. He checked his smartwatch. He told Nora he was going for a long run. He said he would be gone for 2 hours. He left his phone on the wireless charger on the counter. He synced his watch to his earbuds and jogged out the front door. Nora watched him go. She turned to me. She said she was going to take a long bath. She said I should clean up the kitchen. She treated me like the help. I nodded. I waited. I washed a plate. I wiped the counter. I heard her footsteps go up the stairs. I heard the water running in the tub. I looked at the phone on the charger. It was Lucas's primary device, the one I had held for a few seconds in the bathroom. But this time, I had a window. Nora was in the bath. Lucas was miles away. I picked up the phone. It was locked. I knew the passcode was likely changed again. But I had seen him type it yesterday. He was careless when he thought I was medicated. He had typed 4 directions on the swipe pattern. Up, right, down, left. A box. I traced the pattern. The phone unlocked. I did not go to the texts this time. I went to the cloud drive. I knew Lucas organized his life in folders. I scrolled past work and taxes. I found a folder labeled Project N for Nora. My hands trembled as I tapped it. It opened. Inside were subfolders. Phase 1. Doubt. Phase 2. Isolation. Phase 3. Extraction. Phase 4. Asset liquidation. I opened Phase 1. It contained a PDF document titled Gaslighting Script. I opened it. It was a table. On the left column, it listed dates. On the right column, it listed events. Date: October 4th. Event: hide car keys in freezer. Reaction: confusion. Date: October 10th. Event: delete group chat remotely. Reaction: panic. Date: October 12th. Event. Introduce concept of early onset dementia. Reaction. Fear. I felt bile rise in my throat. It was not random. None of it was random. It was a scheduled demolition of my sanity. They had planned every misplaced item. They had scripted every conversation. I took screenshots of the table. I scrolled down. There were notes in the margins. Subject is resilient, one note said. Increased dosage of sedatives, said another. Subject is asking too many questions about finances. Initiate bank lockout protocol. I backed out and opened Phase 3. Extraction. This folder contained drafts of legal documents. A divorce filing citing irreconcilable differences due to spouse's mental incapacity. A restraining order application claiming I was violent. And then, the most damning document of all, a pre-written custody agreement for our dog, giving full ownership to Nora. It was a small detail, but it broke my heart. They wanted to take everything, even the dog. I needed the communication logs. I needed to see them talking about it. I switched apps. I went to the encrypted messaging app he used for work. It required a second password. I tried the box pattern again. Failed. I tried his birthday. Failed. I closed my eyes. Think. What would Lucas use? He was a narcissist. He loved winning. I typed, victory. It unlocked. The chat thread with Nora was at the top. It had thousands of messages. I scrolled back to the beginning. It started 6 months ago. Nora. Is she suspecting anything? Lucas. No. She's too trusting. She thinks we're just close cousins. Nora. I hate waiting. I want her house. I want her life. Lucas. Patience. If we divorce her now, she gets half. If we commit her, I get power of attorney. We get it all. I scrolled faster. I needed the specific messages about the recent events. Lucas. The fire trick didn't work. She didn't scream. Nora. She's tougher than she looks. We need to up the pressure. What about the medication? Lucas. I doubled it in her coffee. She should be a zombie by noon. Nora. Good. If she's drooling when the social worker comes on Monday, it's a slam dunk. Monday. The social worker was coming Monday. That was the deadline. They had called a social worker to evaluate me. They were going to stage a scene where I looked medicated and incompetent. I took screenshots of everything. I screenshotted the dates. I screenshotted the timestamps. I screenshotted the photos. They sent each other photos of them in my bed while I was at the grocery store. Photos of them wearing my jewelry. I heard the water stop running upstairs. Nora was getting out. I had to hurry. I needed to send these to my brother. I opened the email app. I attached the 30 screenshots. I hit send. The file was large. It was taking too long. The circle spun. 20%. I heard footsteps on the landing. 40%. I walked to the sink and turned on the tap to mask any noise. 60%. The footsteps were on the stairs. 80%. Sent. I deleted the sent email. I closed the apps. I locked the phone. I wiped it with the towel. I placed it back on the charger. Exactly as it was. I turned around, just as Nora walked into the kitchen. She was wrapped in a plush robe. My robe. She looked at me. She looked at the phone. She looked back at me. Did the phone ring? She asked. No, I said. My voice was steady. Just the timer on the dishwasher. She narrowed her eyes. She walked over to the phone. She touched it. It was warm. Phones get warm when they charge, but also when they are used. She looked suspicious. It's warm, she said. Induction chargers generate heat, I said. I remembered Lucas explaining that to me once. She seemed to accept that. She opened the fridge. Make me a smoothie, she said. I'm exhausted from all this stress. I made the smoothie. I put the frozen berries in the blender. The noise was deafening. It was a scream I couldn't release. While the blender whirred, I thought about the Phase 4 folder. I hadn't opened it. I needed to know what asset liquidation meant. I poured the smoothie. I handed it to her. She took it without a thank you. She walked into the living room and turned on the TV. I went to the laundry room. It was the only room with a lock that they allowed me to use. I sat on the floor. I had the medical file. I had the chat logs. I had the gaslighting script. But I needed one more thing. I needed audio. I needed them to admit it out loud. Screenshots could be challenged. They could say they were fabricated. But a voice recording of them conspiring in real time? That was undeniable. I remembered the baby monitor in the guest room. I had hidden the receiver under my mattress. But the battery was dead. And I couldn't risk charging it again. I needed a new bug. I looked at the smart speaker on the laundry shelf. It was unplugged. Lucas had unplugged all the smart devices because he was paranoid about big tech listening. I plugged it in. I waited for it to boot up. I connected it to the Wi-Fi using the password I had stolen. I downloaded the companion app on my own phone, which I had hidden in the laundry basket earlier. I set up a drop-in feature. It allowed me to use the speaker as an intercom without it making a sound on the other end. I muted the speaker microphone so they couldn't hear me. I hid the speaker behind the box of detergent. It was close to the kitchen wall. The walls were thin. If they spoke in the kitchen, I would hear it on my phone. I went back to the kitchen. I acted submissive. I asked Nora if she wanted lunch. She said yes. She wanted a salad. I chopped lettuce. Lucas returned from his run. He was sweating. He drank water from the tap. He looked at Nora. Did she take the pills? He asked. Nora looked at me. I was chopping cucumbers. Did you take your vitamins, Emma? Yes, I said. With breakfast, Lucas nodded. Good. The social worker is coming at 10 on Monday. We need her to be out of it. I know, Nora said. I'm going to switch the night meds too. Give her the heavy stuff tonight. They were talking openly in front of me because they thought I was already drugged. They thought the pills I took at breakfast had kicked in. I kept chopping. Keep the rhythm. Don't stop. What about the accounts? Nora asked. I transferred the savings to the offshore holding this morning, Lucas said. 50,000. It's gone. The joint account is empty. And the house? The deed transfer is ready. Once she's committed, I sign as her guardian. The house becomes ours. I felt the knife slip. It nicked my finger. A drop of blood hit the cucumber. I washed it off quickly. They were confessing to everything. Grand larceny. Fraud. Conspiracy. But I wasn't recording. My phone was in the laundry room. I needed to get them to say it again, near the laundry room wall. I need to put a load of towels in, I said. Do it later, Lucas said. Sit down. You look shaky. I just need to start the machine, I said. It helps me relax. The noise. Lucas laughed. Fine. Go do your laundry. Crazy woman and her machines. I walked to the laundry room. I closed the door. I grabbed my phone. I opened the voice recorder. I hit record. I held the phone up to the wall, shared with the kitchen. She's deteriorating fast, Lucas said. His voice was muffled but audible. Did you see her hands shaking? It's the withdrawal, Nora said. Or the toxicity. Who cares? As long as she signs the papers. I'm worried about her brother, Lucas said. He's been quiet. He's in California, Nora scoffed. He can't do anything. By the time he gets here, she'll be in the ward and we'll have the power of attorney. I love it when you talk legal, Lucas said. There was the sound of a kiss. You're going to make a great wife. I'm already a better wife than she ever was, Nora said. She was always so boring, so moral. Morality is for poor people, Lucas said. We're going to be rich. I stopped the recording. I saved it. Confession, kitchen, audio. I had it. I had the trifecta. The documents, the chats, the audio. I was holding a nuclear bomb in my hand, but I couldn't detonate it yet. If I called the police now, Lucas would meet them at the door. He was a lawyer. He was charming. He would say I was off my meds. He would say the recording was taken out of context. He would say I edited it. He would manipulate the situation before they even stepped inside. I needed to leave. I needed to get to a safe harbor and present this evidence to a judge or a detective who wasn't standing on my front porch. But the house was locked. The windows were barred, and Lucas was in the kitchen, blocking the back door. The front door had a deadbolt that required a key from the inside, and the key was in Lucas's pocket. I checked my brother's tracking. He had shared his location with me via the secure link. He was in Nevada. He was driving fast, but he was still 8 hours away. I couldn't wait 8 hours. They were planning to drug me heavily tonight. If I took the heavy stuff, I might not wake up. Or, I might wake up in a facility. Unable to speak, I needed to escape before sunset. I looked at the laundry chute. It was an old house. The chute went from the upstairs hallway down to the laundry room. It was too small to climb up. But maybe I could use it to create a diversion. I went back to the kitchen. I told them the washer was broken. I told them it was leaking. Fix it, Lucas said. You're the homemaker. I can't, I said. There's water everywhere, Lucas groaned. Useless. Absolutely useless. He marched toward the laundry room. Nora followed him. Curious. This was it. They were both in the laundry room. The room was a dead end. I was in the kitchen. The keys to the back door were hanging on the hook by the fridge. Wait. No, the keys weren't there. He had them in his pocket. I looked around frantically. The garage door opener. It was clipped to the visor of his car, which was parked in the garage. But the door to the garage was locked. I heard Lucas yelling from the laundry room. There's no water here. What are you playing at? He was coming back. I had failed. I froze. I had to pivot. I saw it, I cried. I saw water. Maybe it's the pipes in the wall. Lucas stormed out. He grabbed my arm. Stop lying. You're doing this for attention. He dragged me to the living room. Sit. Stay. He went back to the laundry room to inspect the pipes. Nora stayed with me. She watched me like a hawk. You're acting strange, she said. Stranger than usual. I'm scared, I said. It was the truth. You should be, she whispered. You're losing your mind. I needed to get the evidence out of the house physically. If they searched my phone and found the recordings, they would kill me. I was certain of it. I had the brother's email. But the audio file was large, and the upload speed on the data plan was slow in this room. I looked at the window. The mailman was coming up the walk. It was the regular carrier, Mr. Willis. He was a kind man. He always waved. I had an idea. I had a USB drive in my pocket. I had found it in the desk drawer earlier when I was looking for the key. I had transferred the files to it directly from the laptop as a backup. If I could get the USB drive to Mr. Willis. I think the mail is here, I said. Sit down, Nora said. I'm expecting a magazine, I said. Please, I'll get it, Nora said. She walked to the front door. She opened it. Mr. Willis was there. He handed her a stack of envelopes. How is Emma? He asked. I haven't seen her gardening. She's resting, Nora said sweetly. She's not feeling well. Tell her I said hello, Mr. Willis said. Nora closed the door. She tossed the mail on the table. She didn't see me slip the USB drive into the outgoing mail slot in the door before she returned. Wait. The slot was sealed. Lucas had sealed it with duct tape weeks ago to stop drafts. I couldn't use it. I still had the drive. It was burning a hole in my pocket. I had to wait for the night. I had to wait for the heavy drugs. I would pretend to take them. I would pretend to pass out. And then, when they were asleep, I would try the window bars again. But this time, I wouldn't stop at the window. I went to the bathroom. I took the USB drive. I taped it to the inside of my thigh with a Band-Aid. Even if they stripped me, they might miss it. It was my lifeline. Dinner was silent. Lucas placed a plate of pasta in front of me. He placed 2 large white pills next to the fork. Eat, he said, and take your medicine. It will help you sleep. I looked at the pills. They were sedatives. Strong ones, probably crushed Xanax mixed with something else. I ate the pasta. I picked up the pills. I put them in my mouth. I took a drink of water. I pretended to swallow. I slid the pills under my tongue. It was a trick I learned from a movie. It was harder than it looked. The taste was bitter. It burned the sensitive skin of my mouth. Open your mouth, Nora said. She didn't trust me. I opened my mouth. I lifted my tongue. The pills were gone. I had managed to push them into the hollow of my cheek, back near the molars. Good girl, she said. I was excused to go to bed. I went to the bathroom immediately. I spit the half-dissolved pills into the toilet. My mouth was numb. My head spun a little from the small amount that had absorbed. I splashed cold water on my face. I had to stay awake. I went to the bedroom. I lay down. I slowed my breathing. I waited. 1 hour, 2 hours. The house went quiet. I heard Lucas and Nora go into the master bedroom. I heard them laughing. I heard the sound of a bottle opening. Champagne. They were celebrating early. I got up. I was wearing leggings and a dark sweater. I had shoes hidden under the bed. I put them on. I went to the window. I used the letter opener I had kept. I popped the latch on the grate. It swung open. I pushed the window up. I climbed out. My feet hit the mulch of the flower bed. I was out, but I couldn't just run. The yard was fenced. The gate was padlocked. The fence was 6 feet high, and there were cameras. Motion-activated floodlights. As soon as I stepped onto the grass, the yard flooded with blinding white light. Motion detected at backyard. A robotic voice announced from the speaker above the patio. I froze. I was a deer in the headlights. The window above me flew open. Lucas looked out. He saw me. Emma, he screamed. Don't you move. He disappeared from the window. He was coming down. I ran. I didn't run for the gate. I ran for the trellis against the side of the garage. It was old wood, covered in ivy. I scrambled up. The wood cracked. Thorns tore my hands. I reached the roof of the garage. I pulled myself up. I heard the back door slam open. Lucas ran out. He was holding a flashlight. He swept the yard. Where are you? He roared. I lay flat on the garage roof. The gravel dug into my chest. He ran to the gate. He checked the lock. It was still secure. She's in the yard, he yelled to Nora. Get the flashlight. Check the bushes. I crawled across the roof. The other side of the garage dropped down into the alleyway behind the house. It was a 10-foot drop. I looked down. It was dark, concrete. If I jumped, I might break a leg. If I stayed, I would lose my mind. I heard Nora's voice. There. The trellis is broken. They knew. I took a breath. I held the USB drive against my leg. I pushed myself off the edge. I fell. I hit the ground hard. Pain shot up my right ankle. I bit my tongue to keep from screaming. I rolled into a crouch. My ankle throbbed, but it held my weight. I limped down the alley. I stuck to the shadows. I heard them shouting on the other side of the fence. "Call the police," Nora screamed. "Tell them she's armed. Tell them she attacked me." They were initiating the end game. They were calling the cops on me. I had to get to a public place, a gas station, a diner, somewhere with cameras, somewhere with people. I checked my pocket. I had no phone. I had left it in the laundry basket to record. I had no tracker. I was a woman alone in the dark, injured, with no ID, running from the law, but I had the tape on my leg. And I had the truth. I saw headlights at the end of the alley. A police car? No. It was a truck. An old pickup truck. It slowed down. The window rolled down. "Emma?" I stopped. I squinted against the glare. "Emma, get in." It was a voice I hadn't heard in 2 years. It wasn't my brother. It was his best friend, David. My brother had sent the cavalry. "Get in," David yelled. I scrambled into the passenger seat. "Go," I gasped. "Just go." David gunned the engine. The truck peeled out of the alley just as a police cruiser turned the corner, lights flashing. We passed the cruiser. The officer didn't look at us. He was speeding toward my house. Toward the lie. I slumped back in the seat. I reached down and touched the bandage on my leg. "Did you get it?" David asked. He was looking in the rearview mirror. "I got it all," I said. "The script, the logs, the confession." "Good," David said. "Your brother is meeting us at the state line. He has a lawyer with him." I looked out the window. My house was disappearing in the distance. The lights were blazing. It looked like a ship, sinking in the night. I was bruised. I was bleeding. I was penniless. But I was sane, and I was going to burn them to the ground. The truck rattled as we crossed the state line, the vibrations jarring my throbbing ankle. I did not look back. The darkness of the highway felt like a protective blanket after the blinding spotlights of my own backyard. David drove with a focused intensity, his eyes scanning the road for flashing lights. We met my brother, Mark, at a 24-hour diner 3 hours later. He was standing in the parking lot, pacing under the neon sign. He looked older than I remembered, his face lined with worry. When he saw me limp out of the truck, he didn't say a word. He just pulled me into a hug that squeezed the air from my lungs. I felt the tension of the last few months finally break, and I sobbed into his shoulder. It was the first time I had allowed myself to cry since the first message appeared on my phone. We did not waste time. Mark introduced me to the woman standing next to his car. Her name was Sarah. She was a criminal defense attorney. She looked at my bruises, at my bare feet. And then, at the USB drive, I peeled from my leg. She plugged it into her laptop right there on the hood of the car. She watched the video of the burning sketchbook. She listened to the audio of Lucas and Nora discussing the offshore account. She read the gaslighting script. Her expression shifted from professional detachment to cold fury. She closed the laptop and looked at me. She told me we had enough. She said we weren't just going to stop the commitment order, we were going to put them in prison. The next morning, while Lucas and Nora were likely giving their tearful statements to the police about my violent mental break, Sarah was filing an emergency injunction in the county court. She attached the audio files and the screenshots. She contacted the fraud division of the bank. She contacted the medical board regarding the doctor who signed the false affidavit. By noon, the narrative had flipped. The police, who had issued a "be on the lookout" for a dangerous mental patient, received a call from the district attorney. The order was canceled. A new warrant was issued. This one was for Lucas and Nora. I did not go back to the house. I stayed in a hotel with Mark. I bought new clothes. I bought a new phone. I ate food that I knew wasn't poisoned. 2 days later, I watched the security feed from my own house on Sarah's laptop. Lucas had not changed the passwords yet. He was too arrogant, or perhaps too panicked. I saw the moment the police arrived. It was not a social call. 3 cruisers pulled into the driveway. Lucas opened the door, wearing his best suit, ready to charm them. He froze when he saw the handcuffs. Nora tried to run out the back door, the same way I had escaped. An officer was waiting for her by the broken trellis. I watched them being led away. Lucas looked small. Nora looked like a cornered animal. The house, once a prison, was just a building again. The legal process was swift and brutal. The evidence was overwhelming. The gaslighting script became the centerpiece of the prosecution. It was dubbed the playbook of abuse by the media. The public humiliation they had planned for me rebounded on them with catastrophic force. Lucas lost his law license before the trial even began. Nora's past was dug up, revealing a history of small-time frauds and con games. They turned on each other instantly. Lucas claimed Nora masterminded the plan and drugged him too. Nora claimed Lucas was abusive and forced her to comply. It was a pathetic spectacle. I didn't testify. I didn't have to. My silence and the recordings of their own voices did all the work. 6 months later, I stood in front of the house one last time. It was sold. The for sale sign had a sold sticker across it. I was there to sign the final closing papers with the realtor. The money from the sale, along with the recovered funds from the offshore account, was in my name. I walked through the empty rooms. The furniture was gone. The bars were removed from the windows. The air felt light. I went to the fireplace where my sketchbook had burned. The ashes were long gone, swept away by a cleaning crew. I took a small notebook from my bag. I wrote one sentence on the first page. I am the author of my own life. I tore the page out and left it on the mantelpiece. I walked out the front door and locked it. I handed the key to the new owner, a young woman with bright eyes who was excited to start her life there. I wished her luck. I told her the light was beautiful in the kitchen in the morning. I got into my car. Mark was waiting in the passenger seat. He asked me where I wanted to go. I looked at the road ahead. It was open. It was wide. I told him I wanted to go see the ocean. I put the car in drive and pulled away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. There was nothing behind me but ghosts, and I wasn't afraid of ghosts anymore.